Hagalaz is a Nordic rune, one that I'm sure someone from Sweden or Iceland can pronounce its name a lot better than I can. But it is not the name that matters, it's what it represents. Hagalaz represents sudden disruption of plans and of goals. It's like a sudden hail that comes and destroys your crops. Usually seen as of course, as a negative sign, as a warning sign. And of course, in the end, the hail is melted and it goes back to earth, to the ground, and so maybe repeats a kind of cycle. But the point is that it is often seen as a warning sign. And I think we can say a lot about how we can perceive chaos, destruction, in this case, Hagalaz, from a purely secular or God-neutral perspective. There's a lot to be said. Because the first thing that comes to mind, if you're a little bit of a pessimist, is that is there really any kind of prosperity to it if the damn thing just destroyed everything you've been working for like a month, and then there's sudden change, and so maybe at some point in the future it's gonna melt and it's gonna go back to the ground. It seems like in the present there is this real damage. And then maybe potentially, if you reframe the situation enough, maybe in the future there is some potential benefit coming out of it. Well, you can think about it like that, but a better way, a more helpful way to think about it is you better try not to get caught up in this situation in the first place, such that if you know there will be hail, you need to be prepared for the possibility of hail. Let's take this metaphor a little bit more seriously, this metaphor of farming and of hail. The picture usually in these kind of metaphors is there you are being a farmer, having been a farmer your entire life and not having done anything else, and that is like your entire essence. You are a farmer, that cannot change. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there is hail. But hey, it is what it is. They have to cope with it. What can you do about it? You can just sit there and let it pass, like a storm that is passing, like a winter that is passing, and hope for the best next time. It is the kind of imagery that I actually don't really like about how some people think about negative, so to speak, negative events in life. Look, this kind of imagery is far from the reality we find ourselves in. Usually the hail doesn't exist in a vacuum, does it? It wouldn't be the first time that it hails. You kind of know that, hey, it hails every now and then. So why not, for example, price it into your crops? You can adjust the risk of destruction, not just by hail, but also by like pests. And when you end up finally harvesting something, you can sell it for a little bit higher and sort of like offset or mitigate the risks that could have been or would be every now and then. Right? You can also like create or purchase a sort of insurance, for example, to again mitigate the risks of destruction of your property or of the crops. But these might be a little bit of a modern sort of ways around it and might get us out of the metaphor. So, okay, let's think of other ways that you could navigate the hail. You do understand that there will be hail. So why wait for it to happen and then get the shorter end of the stick? For example, if you care about your crops too much, then create a shelter for them. If that is not possible, there's nothing that can be done, and you're farming, well, maybe the very existence of hail, regular hail, is all the information you need from the world telling you that, hey, do not fucking farm. You keep farming in a hailstorm and you expect to have crops. Doesn't make sense. So I ask again, why be the loser in the story? Why not be someone who comes out after the hail and helps repair the damages? That seems to be a very profitable business model in an area that there's a lot of hail regularly. The point is, you do not have to be a farmer, even if that is what you have been your whole life. In its analogy, of course, a crop is damaged, but the land seems to be okay. So is the farmer. The farm is alive, the land is fine, it's just the crops that is damaged. So not everything is destroyed by hail, and therefore, why do we attach our identities or expectations to what can be destroyed rather than what cannot be taken away from us. This is in essence how chaos and destruction is not just something that is out there and must be accepted, but something that is good because it strikes those part of us, our ideas or our plans that simply do not work. It breaks the weakest link in the chain so that we can develop a better chain. The very possibility of hail also prepares us for other possibility of destruction. For example, for the possibility of tornado or pests. Not directly, of course, but indirectly, because it gets you thinking, how else can my plan be sabotaged? If it is a particularly vulnerable plan, do I really want it? Do I really want to move forward with this plan? If I do, what can I do to mitigate those risks? Those risks that I know can be there, even if I can't exactly define how they will take place. Well, because what I'm really concerned with is not the nature of the risk per se, but the effect that the risk can have on my system or on my plans, and how strongly and how frequently it can do that. I don't need to know in advance that maybe one day there will be earthquake, but there is a difference between a kind of a plan that has some room, has some wiggle room for these events, and plans that are too rigid and too fragile, to use the more or less technical term. I guess the lesson I take from existence of hail is one of adaptability. The idea is quite simple, and that is this: the more you expand and generalize what you want, in comparison, for example, being free versus being rich, versus being rich by doing this specific thing. One of them is a lot more generalized, the other is a lot more specific. So the more you expand what you want, the more ways open up so that you can take advantage of them. Then you can see what is the best way that suits you in your unique situation to get there. Since your identity is not attached to any of these ways, any form of destruction is inherently informational that, hey, you should be doing something else, or you should be doing the same thing differently. In that light, you cannot thank the destructive forces enough for giving you that feedback, for showing you what parts of whatever you're trying to do is weak. On the other hand, if what you want is something super specific and fragile, like farming in a very hilly area with no possibility of protection or hedging or anything like that, but it is just a matter of logical deduction that you're going to have your ass handed to you. There you will hate destructive forces because they take away from you the very thing that you value the most. And maybe that is something that you're okay with, for example. Of course, there's a lot that can be said about this topic. For example, what if the destruction is so strong it just destroys everything? Or what if there is some random event? For example, in evolutionary biology, you can think of a genetic drift. What if there's a random event, random thing, a black swan type event that is opposed to something repeatable, and just so it's not a hail that we know happens, it's something else, and that doesn't happen or has never happened before, and that destroys you. It doesn't give you any kind of feedback. It just destroys. That can be a topic for another video, of course. There are those kind of destructive forces as well, or at least we can conceive of them. But the short answer to all of these is that you do not have much choice but to move forward anyways. Or rather, in the instances that these events happen, there will remain individuals to tell the story of how they overcame their obstacles. And there will always be those who, despite having done everything right, things just didn't work out for them.